So in this video, I want to go over a few translations of the Odyssey that I've read, that I enjoy, and in order to hopefully suggest some translations to you that you might enjoy too. And I don't want this video to come across as if I'm saying you need to read this translation or you're doing it wrong. So I don't want that to be the point. I'm just going to go over what worked for me and maybe it might work for you too. So the first translation that I read was the Robert Fagles Odyssey, and this translation is really good because Fagles emphasizes this kind of melodic verse that works really good, and I found it really pleasing to read, and he really captures the blood and thunder of the story, so to speak. Like all of the action scenes work really well, and all of the scenes where the Odysseus and his men are being tossed around by the storms on the ocean and everything. Those scenes work all really well in the Robert Fagles translation, and I think it's why it's my favorite. It just works really well, and with the Robert Fagles translation, you also get the benefit of the Bernard Knox introduction. He tells you everything you need to know about Homer's world and the ancient Mediterranean, and so it's a great book to have for that too. So if you really enjoy the history of the Bronze Age or the ancient Greeks, definitely read the introduction because it's really good. It's about, I think, like 60 pages, and it's really good. The other translation that has a great, equally good probably in the way of the introduction is the Peter Green translation. This book is great. Peter Green he translated Homer at the end of a very long career studying the ancient Mediterranean. I think he was first published in the 1950s. And he translated Homer about maybe 10 years ago or 2018, around that time. And so he had the benefit of all of this background knowledge of Homer's world and the Mycenaeans and all the Greeks, the ancient Greeks of the Odyssey and the Iliad. And so his introduction is really good too. As far as the verse, so all of these are written in blank verse, but Peter Green's, maybe it's very well written, but it doesn't quite capture the dramatic moments, I think, as well as Robert Fagles, but it's still really good. So I think the big bonus that you get with the Peter Green translation is the glossary in the back of the book. So the Robert Fagles is kind of spare in the way of notes. It only has maybe 10 or 15 pages of notes in the back, but Peter Green gives you like maybe 70 pages of what he calls a synopsis. So Peter Green wrote a synopsis at the end of his book of all 24 books of the Odyssey. He wrote a synopsis for all of them at the end of the book in prose. So basically he translated the Odyssey in blank verse and then in prose too, because his synopsis is like 80 or maybe 70 pages long. So, and then he goes into what he calls it the glossary. So in the glossary, Peter Green gives you the meaning of all these terms and places, or I should say places and people of the Odyssey. So like Agamemnon has an entry in here, and the Aegis, like the Aegis that Zeus gives to Athena, is in here, Aegis, and that's the object. It has a bigger role in the Iliad, but my point is that Peter Green, regardless of how obscure or how important the name of a place or person is, he gives you the meaning of that in the glossary at the back of the book. So it's really great to have. So the great Steve Donahue, his method of reading, if you're reading Homer for the first time, he recommends that you go to your local library and pick out maybe you have 2 or 3 translations on the shelf you can choose from, and take those and read maybe 10 pages out of each and use that to choose which translation you're going to read. And I totally agree with that. That's a great way to do it. The only thing I would add to that probably is if you choose the Robert Fagles translation, for example, and you also have the option of Peter Green in your library, maybe check this one out too, just so that you have that benefit of the glossary in the back of the book, because there were tons of terms that that I thought I knew, that I didn't actually understand what they were, or I knew what they were, but I didn't understand, I knew where Crete was, for example, but I didn't realize why Odysseus brought up Crete or the Cretans in the story. So, and Peter Green he describes in detail all of these things that have unique names and all of these places and all of the islands, the names of these islands that are in the story of the Odyssey. He tells you what they are and the history sometimes of these places and why they're important to the story. So it's great to have that glossary on hand in the same book. And the other translations here don't have that, so that's a huge plus for the Peter Green version. The other translation I wanted to mention is the Daniel Mendelsohn. And I should say real quick that just talk about how well constructed some of these books are. Like this Daniel Mendelsohn translation was published by the University of Chicago Press, and it's just a beautiful book in and of itself. Like, it has these great end pages that shows you a map of, the Bronze Age, I guess, Mediterranean, or the area around Greece and modern day Turkey. Like, it doesn't go into a ton of detail, but it gives you all the major places, like, Troy. Like, Troy is right here, and then Ithaca is way over here to the west. And so you can kind of get an idea of what, if you were Odysseus traveling in a glorified kayak from, Troy all the way down to, Ithaca. I mean, imagine what it would be like trying to do that. It kind of gives you an idea of what it would take to feasibly make that journey. And it's really well constructed, and it kind of has this, on the boards, it has this papery, or like almost a canvas feel to it, like the type of material that a sail might be made out of. And it's just a really, almost a work of art in and of itself. And Mendelsohn has this excellent introduction where he talks about, the introduction is great, but then he has a note on the translation, which is almost a critical essay on translating Homer. And I won't go into too much detail about it because you can read it yourself, but I wanted to mention one example of why he goes into different reasons on why he chose very specific English words for the Greek. Like, I really like this one example he talks about with Athena's eyes, because Homer will refer to Athena as the gray-eyed goddess a lot, or some variation of that. He won't always say Athena. But Mendelsohn says, take Athena's eyes. The word glopius is a compound adjective of which the first element, glaucos, could indeed mean gray, so the gray-eyed goddess, but whose primary meaning was gleaming, gleaming like the edge of a sword in the bright sunlight, for example. But the adjective is in fact derived from the noun glox, or glox is the Greek word for owl, he says, because of that bird's brilliantly gleaming eyes. Anyone who lives in the countryside as I do, he says, and has had an unexpected encounter with a barn owl at night will know exactly what the goddess's unnerving stare looks like, and knows too what it's like to be the object of those eyes' stare. And this undoubtedly, he says, is what the poet was thinking of, and it's why he says, my Athena is the goddess of the bright owl eyes. That's how he refers to Athena in his translation. So that gives you an idea of Mendelsohn kind of has this approach where he takes every word by itself and very carefully chooses that word when he translates it into modern English. Like he has this other part he mentions in his introduction where it's really important for the translator to get certain mechanics right, or certain elements of the story right. Like the first word on the line was very important for Homer. It would often emphasize what Homer was trying to emphasize at the time, at that point in the story. So he brings that up too, and his introduction is very good because he explains all that. And so these are the three that I would recommend if you're reading the Odyssey for the first time. You've got the Peter Green. It's probably, well, so again, these are all written in blank verse, but the Robert Fagles is the most, I think, melodic and, maybe the most poet friendly if you like the poetry of the Odyssey, if you want to read it for that. But also it's probably the most approachable, and it has a reputation for that as well. And then you've got the Mendelsohn and the Peter Green, of course. The other two that I've read are the Emily Wilson, which I didn't like as much, and the Fitzgerald. Now the Fitzgerald translation is great too, but it does rhyme, so it's written in rhyme rather than blank verse like these. So it's not like rhyming couplets, but he has, like, there is a rhyme scheme in it, so be aware of that. And the Emily Wilson, I guess the reason I didn't like it was because it has that reputation for being kind of violently bringing Homer into the contemporary world at the expense of Homer's original meaning. That's, I think, the most common criticism for Emily Wilson, and I definitely picked that up when I read it. So I just wanted to talk about these three translations briefly, just to give you an idea of where you might want to go when you read the Odyssey. But something you'll notice after you finish the Odyssey for the first time and you enjoy it, you'll definitely want to read more translations. So at least I did, and a lot of people do when they finish the Odyssey. And you don't have to read, even though the Odyssey is kind of a sequel to the Iliad, you don't have to read the Iliad first. Like I did, I read the Odyssey first. It doesn't really matter what version or what text or what poem you read first. There's a lot of events that happen in between the Iliad and the Odyssey. So the Iliad, of course, is the story of the Greeks and the Trojans going to war. And then all of this stuff happens, like the Trojan horse and the burning of Troy, and all of these, a lot of the named heroes of the Greek heroes, when they're coming back to Greece, they meet disaster and they die. Like Ajax, Olean Ajax, for example, dies, and Agamemnon dies in a different way. A bunch of the heroes die in between the events of the two poems. And the Odyssey is, of course, Odysseus's version of events and his story of traveling home after the events of the war in Troy. So absolutely, if you want to read the Odyssey first, there's no issue doing that. So that's everything I wanted to cover with the Odyssey. Thank you so much for watching.